Some say that without darkness light could never shine, that there is a balance to existence, and they hail the ones above us gods, beings of mercy and benevolence. But what of those below? Too often are they forgotten, shunned for being the other side of ultimately the same coin. Truly, there is no good or evil, light or dark. There are only choices, and the actions of those who pose as deities, or those who work thanklessly to maintain the world as those who created it had intended. Gods had begun, humanity had all players deep and challenging, different is less likely to get me horribly When Terraria was first conceived, it was planned that its creatures would be given specific roles to play in its maintenance, but first a world would need to be created in the first place. Contrary to what many believe, its overseers did not form the planet from nothing, rather it was built. Painstakingly forged from the cosmic dust, for Terraria was special. It was not just any planet created naturally, but a destiny unto itself, created for a very specific purpose that only the overseers were ever privy to. Creatures notorious for withstanding the most inhospitable conditions in the galaxy were compensated handsomely to work on the vast project. For millennia the creatures constructed the planet, gathering the fine particles of matter between stars and corralling meteors with desirable compositions. All of this took place under the watch of the overseers. Centuries passed beneath their unfaltering gaze, but they cared not how long it took, as long as the world was to their exacting specifications. Eventually primordial Terraria came together, and the builders thought their work to be over. But unlike every other planet in existence, Terraria's unnatural state caused problems, and it transpired that the world could not regulate its own internal heat, threatening to cool rapidly and shatter if its core ever went without maintenance. Therefore, a custodian the overseers had not expected was required, one that knew the true nature of the world. Imploring the builders to remain and watch over the core of Terraria, ensure it remained hot and molten, they quickly refused, unwilling to subject themselves and inevitably their descendants to what amounted to being trapped in a fiery prison. The new planet growing cooler and already beginning to crack, the overseers saw that they had little choice if their plans were going to stay on track. They abducted the builders and sealed them within Terraria's core, giving them the ultimatum to work to maintain the core or die along with the planet they had created. The builders no longer had many choices of their own and eventually chose life, even if it was a meagre existence in that hellish place. Over the eons, without any knowledge of the goings-on above them, the builders tried to form lives for themselves and their children, constructed homes from the flaming rocks around them, and did as they had been mandated, to maintain the core and keep Terraria alive. Bitterness festered in their race though, the rage and desire for vengeance growing with every generation. As the surface world progressed, they knew of the subterranean dwellers only as legends perpetuated by the heralds of the overseers, that they were evil demonic creatures. As time wore on though, the rage they held would drive them to become the very creatures they were rumoured to be. Eventually they would come to forget their own names, what their ancestors had been, and even who their vengeance was targeted at. They had become creatures of instinct, tending to the core out of habit, and lashing out at anyone who encroached on their domain. The core would become known to the surface dwellers simply as the underworld, but some would call it hell, believing it to be a fiery place of torture and damnation, where all bad souls would end up, to be kept in perpetual pain for all eternity. Ironically, this description was not too far from the truth. Only it wasn't the soul of Terrarians who were tortured for all eternity, but those who did nothing but build the world with their own hands. Hell is no twisted dimension of pain, but a prison for the innocent, a forced labour camp created by beings far more powerful than anything on Terraria, who were blinded by their own ambitions. Like all other things in Terraria, however, their story is not all that simple either, as Terraria was never just a whim of creation, built simply because it could be, but part of a much larger galactic scheme that will be the cause for every major incident ever to occur on the planet. Regardless though, it was ultimately a story like so many others. A weaker people had suffered for the hubris and desires of those more powerful. With luck though, one day the truth of the demons, these builders of worlds, would surface, and they may once more bask in the light of the surface world.